Hello YouTube and hello viewers and welcome back to my channel. My name's Wazza and I take you for all these Unreal Engine 4 tutorials. Apologies for the lateness on the video. I had to recreate the 2D fighting game that won in the poll, so I had to have some time to develop that so I can at least get to a point where I can start releasing some videos. Now it's pretty much done, so now I can pretty much cut it into segments and then start giving you some tutorials on how to recreate a 2D fighting game within Unreal Engine 4. I just want to ask a question to my viewers though. If anyone knows someone that either makes sprites or will be able to find out how I could access some 2D fighting sprites that are obviously free and I can use for educational use, please give us a shout. Just leave me a message. I can obviously put you into my channel or whatever. I can plug you in if needs be. But I do need some sprites so we can make the game look a bit pretty, because at the moment it's just by default and it looks kind of ugly. So obviously if we want to make it look pretty, I need someone or I need some sprites that I can work with to make this look good. So without the jibber-jabbery, let's get started. So as you can see, I am using Unreal Engine 4.14. Obviously there's more versions that we can use, for example 4.15, but I haven't used that yet, so I don't really want to touch that version just yet. So I'm going to stick with 4.14 for now. And I'm going to just create a new project. Hopefully it shouldn't take too long to load up. It shouldn't, my machine's not too bad. It will load preferably quickly, hopefully. But yeah. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to make a new project. And the project we're going to create is going to be a side-scroller project. And we're actually just going to call this project, we'll just call this YouTube Series 2D Fighting. Oh no, can't do that one. Just call it Fight. YouTube. Actually, just call it YouTube because I've got so many. Because I did so many tests. YouTube Live 2D Fight. There we go. That'll do. And we're just going to create the project. So it shouldn't take too long. Whilst we're waiting for that to load, guys, remember to hit that subscribe button, like, and share this with all your friends if you like my video. And yeah, this series is going to be quite long. There's a lot of work that I've put into this, so hopefully you guys will benefit from this. At the moment, it's only going to be local, so you'll be able to play with your friends on your machine. But hopefully we'll be able to implement some multiplayer, replicate some sprites, and you'll be able to get your friends to connect to your machine or their machine, and you can play as hosts and etc. So as you can see on our scene, hopefully I got that open, yes I have. So on the scene, you can see it's our temporary 2D side scroller. I'm not going to go through everything like movements and stuff. I've done that in previous videos. So this is more for my advanced users. If you're not too sure how to do 2D side scrollers, look at my first tutorial series. There's loads of information in there. But I'm going to sort of go very more advanced into this session. So I'm going to be quite quick amongst things. So first of all, let's just get rid of all this stuff. So we're going to get rid of that. And we're going to keep our character. So obviously we're going to use him. We're just going to put him on the floor for now. As you can see, everything's working fine. We can play and everything's working as we want it to work. But in this instance, remember, we're going to be making two players. So we're going to have player 1 versus player 2. So we're going to have to make another character. On top of that, we're going to need controllers that are going to be able to control those characters. So if you could imagine, we're going to have two characters, two controllers, and one game mode that's going to support all this happening at the same time, which is not too difficult to happen. But what we need to do is, first things first, we're going to get rid of this camera. We don't need it because we're going to make a camera very similar to all those 2D fighters where, for example, if two characters move away from each other, the camera sort of zooms out. If they're close to each other, the camera sort of goes closer. So we're going to sort of work that category out and how do we manage that and how do we get that to work properly. So we're going to get rid of that. So first things first, we're going to go into our 2D side scroller BP, into our character, and we're actually going to trash the camera. So if we look on the left hand side on our components, we'll get rid of the boom and the camera component. And we're going to save that. Only because we don't need the camera, we're actually going to make one for the game itself. Now you'll notice there's lots of stuff inside the character already. We're actually going to move some stuff out of here because we don't need it. We're actually going to put it into the player controller instead of having it inside the character. So we're going to need this, so we're going to steal this in a second, but first we need to make a controller for our characters. Now to do that, it's quite simple. We right click, make a blueprint class, and we're going to call it get a player controller. And we're going to call this my player camel case, so player controller, I can't even spell tonight, controller 1. Okay, so we're just going to call it my player controller 1. That way I can see that this is controller 1, even though some things are going to happen inside player controller 1 that's going to control player 2. But again, those will be later on in the series and you'll see exactly what's happening when we get to that point. So let's open up this controller and you'll notice there's a camera. We can sort of ignore that, to be honest. Nothing's going to happen with that. And inside this controller, we need to steal all that movement which is inside the character. So we're actually just going to copy this. So select it, Control C, go into my player controller 1, Control V. Now straight away you can see there's some errors. For example, these sets are broke because we have got no variables. So let's make one. A variable, it's already set to a Boolean, which is quite nice. And we're just going to call this moving R for moving right. That's basically what this means. Boolean is moving right. That's what that B is for. And we're just going to set these. I'm going to pretty much copy what's here. So I'm going to put that there, plug that into there, and delete that. So make sure that's ticked because that one was. And we do the same down here. Set this. See, this is not on. So we're actually going to drag that onto there. And this one's actually coming off the true statement. So we're going to actually plug that into there and remove that out. So that's the Boolean setup. But we have another issue that the target's not the self anymore. We actually want to target the actual character himself. Now to do this is quite simple. Let's actually just delete those. And we're just going to move this out a bit so we have a bit of space. Double click just to fix these nodes a little bit. Make them look a little bit more, oh man, a little bit more better. Oh Jesus, moving these is a pain. We'll just do it here. There we go. And what we'll do is we're going to cast to our 2D side scroller. So our actual character. So 2D side scroller character. And that will automatically lock onto, this is why I wanted these nodes, so I can put this on here. So we can see we're casting to our 2D side scroller character. We're going to have another one that's going to cast obviously to our character too. Or in this case, maybe not. We probably won't need one. We could just activate a variable. But in this case, we're going to cast to our 2D side scroller, this guy here. But again, it's not going to work because we don't have anything coming off this object. And the object's pretty straightforward. This is just going to be get controller pawn. It is controller pawn. There we go. So we're going to get the controller pawn. And we need to fix this target. Now, we can either just pull this into here, or you can pull that. Either one would work. I just prefer doing it this way, even though it looks messy. But, I mean, we could make it look a little bit better, I suppose. We could just double click on these nodes. Just move this down here. Double click on this node. Move it down here. That looks a little bit better. Obviously, you guys can make it clean, but I'm doing a tutorial series, so it can be a little bit messy. So we're going to comment this out. I'm just going to call this player 1 controller. Okay. So that's the player 1 controller set. Now that would obviously work if we hit play. Actually, we need to remove this one, sorry. Let's go back into the actual character and delete these because we don't need them now. Delete those, and we'll delete the jump for now. Leave the rest because we're going to need that. So if I had to play the game, that would technically work, but I can't see anything, so really that's not going to help me in regards to whatever I'm doing with inside the game. So our next step is to get our camera working. Now that's pretty straightforward. All we do is go back into our scene, and we're going to do a very simplistic camera because obviously time. I don't like spending too much time on tutorials because you guys get bored. So if we just rotate that and pull it out, now you'll be able to see the scene from this camera. Now this camera is going to do some crazy stuff in later tutorials. It's actually going to move with the players, but for now we're going to keep it static because we want to see everything working inside the game. Now obviously if I hit play, I'm not going to see from that camera because I need to tell when the level loads, we need to see that camera, so we need to look from that camera. So again, this is very simple. On the level, we're just going to go open level blueprint. Now a lot of stuff's going to happen in this level blueprint because every time we load a level, even when we have, for example, a level select scene, we're going to have to run a sequence of events to happen. For example, resetting characters, placing them where you want them to start fighting, resetting counts of, I don't know, health and win rates and all that sort of jazz we need to put inside the level. So first things first, we need to set the camera. So I've already got it selected, so I'm just going to put it in for now. But we need an event begin play. So when the level loads, we need to do some stuff. Now the first thing we're going to do is put in a sequence. Now if you don't know what I just did, I just hold down S and clicked. You can search for it, but that's the long way of doing it. But again, you can search for it if you want to. Sequence, there it is there. But in this case, just S and click does the job. And so what we want to do is we just want to get a sequence for now so we can see the camera working when the level loads. And off the camera, actually we can just go off the first sequence. We can say set view target. And you see you won't see it because we need to turn this off. And we should have set view target with blend. Right, so basically this is just going to, as you can see, it sets the view target blending with variable controls, i.e. target is player controller. So we can grab our camera and we're just going to take it, put it into our target. So we're what we want to view with. And here, as it said, it's just player reference controller. So we're just going to get the player, oh, I spelled that completely wrong. Get the player controller. So we want to get that player controller. Sorry, I was just seeing if the recording was still going. So get player controller. I just turn the context sensitive on and plug that in. Now, this is going to get extremely huge, but for now we're just going to call this camera, because what's going to happen is in the next few tutorials, this is actually going to become a mathematical sequence where we're going to find out where player 1 is and player 2 is, and the camera is going to sort of move wherever the players are, so it can zoom out, zoom in. Again, as I said, very similar to sort of Smash Bros or Street Fighter, how you see the camera changing if the players move apart from each other. When they're closer, you get a better view of what's happening. So if I compile that and play, we should be able to see now the camera's on the viewport where we want to see. And if I click in, obviously my player is not moving yet because we haven't set up anything for him to move as properly yet. And I'll show you why. So remember, we made this player controller. Now the player controller is controlling the player, so i.e. this player 1 controller. But we need to make sure that this player controller can also activate our player 2 controller. But in our game mode, so i.e. this game mode, if you double click on it, where we see player controller, we can see that we can only select one controller at a time. So we're going to put some information in this player controller to activate player 2 controller. But for now, we're just going to select my player controller 1, compile and save. And if I play now, I should be able to move. And as you can see, I can move. And you see the camera's not moving because that's very static. All right, so that's not going to do anything because that's going to change depending on where my characters are inside the game. So that's pretty much setting up for the 1 player. Our next step now is to start thinking about how do we set up for our 2nd player. So what we're going to do is we're going to quite simply just duplicate this player. Just press enter because it's going to be called 2D side scroller character 2. And we do nothing inside 2D side scroller character 2. So if you double click on him, he'll still have the same values as what it was in player 1, which is fine because we have to update his animations and things in number 2. But anything else we don't need, right? So we're just going to make sure we leave it as it is. We don't need to change anything in regards to that section. But what we do need to do is we need to spawn in that player 2 controller. Now, in this beginning section, it's going to be a bit bodgy, but obviously when it gets further in, you're going to see it works out a lot more better. So first things first, we're going to go into our player controller, so your first player controller. And what we need to do is we need to make another player controller because we need player controller 2. So we're just going to go player controller and call this my player controller 2. Okay, save that if you want. Save it. Again, not much is going to happen in this as of yet, but we need to just set it up so the character will be able to spawn in. So let's go into our player controller 1, and inside here we want to set up so we can actually access player controller 2 and also spawn in our 2nd player. So this is quite simple. We just go event begin play. And what we need to do is we need to spawn first our player controller and then also spawn in our character. Now this is not so difficult, but we need to set up some variables first. So our first variable is going to be called char2, so character2. And the variable type, if we type in character, you should get your 2D side scroller character2 reference. So it's actually our character. And we want to select the reference of that character. We'll just compile that. And we also want to get the reference to the controller. So we're going to call this char2 controller. And inside the variable type, we're just going to type in my player controller. And you can see we get player controller 2. And we want reference of my player controller 2. And we're going to compile and save that. And you're going to see why. So first, we need to spawn actor from class. And this one, our very first one is going to be our controller. So remember we made that controller. So we're going to say my player controller 2. Okay. We'll get into the spawn transform in a second. But what we want to do is, because we're spawning that controller in, we actually need to set our controller now. Oops, what happened there? Char to player control. There we go. Don't know why that didn't save. So we want to get the player controller, and we're going to set this value. Very important that we set the controller up, because we're going to use that for reference throughout the rest of the project. So we're going to need that. And then what we need to do after that, once we set the controller, we can then bring in our character. So we're going to spawn actor from class, and we're going to spawn in our 2D side-scrolling character. So number 2, we're going to need him. And same as before, we're just going to set that character. So we're going to set the character. So now we have reference to our character within inside the game. All of this is controlled in the controller. And obviously, it's not going to work because there's a few things we need to set up first. And the last thing we need to do is just possess. So we need to possess our character. Okay. And basically what we want to possess is going to be our controller 2. So we want to possess the controller. And we also want to possess the pawn, which is char2. So we want to possess those two. Right? So that's basically just setting it up so we can set our variables for the controller and set the variable for our character, and then we can possess it. So basically possess means you can play it, or you can use that specific character. So for now, we just need a location for it to spawn. So we're just going to make a transform off here. I'm very wary about time, guys, so I'm trying to be rather quick about this. So we're going to try and make a transform. And basically we need to throw in some values. In this case, we're just going to use some values that I had previously. If you want references, basically I just moved the character over here and took some reference from the values here. I just wrote them down in a notepad next to me, so these tutorial series are a little bit more quicker. But in this case, I have 398, and then minus 13.4, and then the next one is 275 on that axis. So that's our return value for that, and we also need the return value for that there. There's probably a better way of doing this, but for quick sense, we're just doing it for this for series 1. Again, I say this is going to change, guys, but for now, this is just basic setup so you can get everything working on your screen. So we compile and save that and play. You'll notice now we have player 1, and now we have player 2. Player 2 doesn't do anything. We haven't set them up to do anything as yet, but we have player 1 on the screen, and we have player 2, all controlled through our player controller. And obviously we can possess that character. Once we set up as controllers, all this will work as we want to. So what we can do is we can just comment this section out. And we're going to say set up player 2. Again, this is going to get a lot more bigger, so it might be a good idea to move it somewhere you got some space. But yeah, that's all going to change further on with inside the series. So I'm going to call that an end of a session. Again, thank you very much for joining me in this session. Hopefully you will be able to set up your fighting scene with the camera and putting in player 1 and player 2. Again, if you get confused, leave some comments down below. If you've got any suggestions, don't forget, we've got a nice community going now within the channel. Some people will be able to help you out. If you've got suggestions for anyone else in the channel, help them out. Don't forget, any little bit helps everyone in my channel. If you really enjoyed this session, please remember to like. If you really like this, subscribe. If you really, really like this, share this with everyone you know. But yes, I'm Wayne. Nice taking you for the session. And I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.